Thank you, those who've hugged me on this side, not on the other side. I appreciate that. But I'm pleased. I'm very pleased with the progress. God's blessed me a lot, and it's not hurting like it did for a year. So that's already a big win. I will say this as we start today. Not only did Nancy and I love you and love coming here because you're such a welcoming group of people, and we feel an openness and a kinship. If we lived in this county and I weren't working for another church, both of those are problems that I have, we would love to be worshiping with you all the time. But we also love other things. We both love the Bible. And both of us learned that from Sunday school teachers who helped me to respect the Bible when I was a child. So I'm thrilled to see the children going. Thank you if some of you take turns teaching and helping the children. It's an incredible investment in the future of our world, not just your families. My father actually refused to go to church when I was young, and my mother carried me to Sunday school by herself. And that's been such a huge blessing. Eventually, he did make a commitment to follow the Lord and returned to church as he had been taken as a young person and became very, very committed. But there was a period there where my mom took me and I felt the blessing. So thank you for investing in children. Actually, I'm a little bit jealous because I knew you had a kids takeover of the church, right? I forgot what you called it. And I thought I would love to have been here on that day. Every church should do that every now and then. So thanks for elevating the kids and honoring them in that way. And not just kids, but young people like Dakota opening our service today. It's an inspiration in lots and lots of ways. Over time, I've been blessed to learn how to read the scriptures a little better. And I pray that through this message that I can help you to learn that as well. Actually, I've been blessed in thousands of ways by reading the scriptures, by following them, by seeking to apply them to my life. I believe you also will be blessed the more you read the scriptures and the more you apply it to your life. Don't give up on that commitment. There's so much to learn from the good examples of people, from the commands, and from the bad examples as well, as we'll see today. Today is a challenge for me, though, I have to confess. It's a big challenge, actually, and here's why. Decades ago, when Nancy and I lived in Brazil, we lived there for 11 years and started several churches and a small Bible college. It was a great blessing. But while we were there, I decided I would read the Bible all the way through in a year. And after I did that, I thought, well, that was amazing. That was helpful. I'll do it again. And so I started and began to read the Bible through once every year. Now, this year I'm reading through the New Living Translation, which you may or may not be familiar with, but that's the one I'll be reading as we go through the lesson today. And I got to say that reading the Bible doesn't actually change, it didn't change my life immediately that year. But over time, I began to realize that I became more and more familiar with different sections of it. And sometimes I would change it. I'll read different versions or different languages even. I've done it in Portuguese because that's where we were living in Brazil at the time. One year, I made a list of all of the questions that came to my mind. I just went through really quick. I didn't stop on them, but I'd make a list of all the questions. It was lots of questions. One year, I made a list of all the passages that I really liked. I thought, well, this one, I like this one. I want to keep this one. I want to remember this one. And it was a pretty long list as well. And one year, I made a list of all the verses and passages that I hated. It was a lot also. I was surprised at myself, not just passing through them. And the reason I tell you that is today's passage that's assigned from the story of David is in 2 Samuel chapter 13, and it was on that list. It's one of the ones that I hate enough. Like if you had been asking me what should go in the Bible and not, I probably would have cut that one out and said people don't need that. But in reality, I don't believe that at all. I believe we need all the parts of Scripture. And I believe there are things to learn from all the parts of Scripture as well. So we're in the story of the life of David, and let's just recap this because we're getting close to the end of this. David was indeed a person after God's own, you say it, heart. The heart of God was evident through the life of David and the way he lived and the way he structured his priorities in life. He unified the people of God in ways that have endured until now, 3,000 years later. He inspired God followers through poetry and songs, some of the ones that we still sing today. It's amazing. Yesterday, a friend of mine sent me a song. He texted me a song that he really liked. That was one of the prayers of David from the Psalms that is absolutely beautiful. We're so blessed by his life. David called people to worship. He dedicated a place of worship to the true God. He was a great man. He was a great spiritual leader. And I'm here to tell you that your life, yes, your life has been blessed in lots of ways. But he was a fighter. He was a warrior. He was a survivor. And sometimes he was downright cunning and even sometimes arrogant. We don't have a lot of information, detailed information about his home life. I would find that fascinating. But today's story is focused on his home life and his legacy through his children. An important concept for all of us in lots of ways. Here's what we do know. In Scripture, we have recorded lists of 21 different sons that David had. We have the name of one daughter, and we're going to read about her today. We know that there were other daughters, but we don't know how many. And you would say, wow, that's a lot of children. Well, as I mentioned, I've gone to Africa. Evan went with me. One of the ladies that we talked to over there has 100 brothers and sisters. So it's not just ancient stories, but in that culture, there's some Islamic influences, and some people have multiple wives even still today in that area, and they have often dozens or even up to and above 100 children. It seems like something from way, way back in the past, but there's different cultures all around the world even today. None of those children of David were from his first wife. They were from at least 7 different women. I want to say a word about that. When you look at stories like that, it doesn't mean, well, I can follow the example of David, which is what some of our African friends did. Well, I can follow that because it's in the Bible. It's just because it's in the Bible doesn't mean it's right. It means it's right if it's commanded in the Bible or it's explained as a part of God's will for your life. People who study the Bible will often use the term disordered family relationship, meaning David's family was not out of touch with his culture of that day, but it was out of touch with the order that God intended. As God created man and woman, He created one man for one woman. Jesus Himself later referred back to that as the ideal family relationship. It doesn't mean that you can't have a different relationship, that there are sometimes circumstances even today that we find ourselves in that are not ideal, but they are disordered. So that's the case with David. He had a relationship that wasn't the ideal that God had, but it produced a lot of blessings as well, and you may have experiences similar. He had the ultimate blended family, right? I mean, we think of blended family, but the scramble, trying to make a chart of it, would be really complex. With this kind of blended family, I'm expecting David's professional demands as a warrior, military leader, and king of a country would make it a really big challenge to be the ideal parent. I don't know what you think the ideal parent is, but he had a lot of odds stacked against him just because of his circumstances. So today's lesson is not particularly about living right. It's not about blessing others in your work, but it is about how to leave the best possible legacy through your children. Now, I want to say a word about that. If you have a child, If you have an adopted child, Nancy and I have 2 adopted children. If you have a foster child, if you're helping to raise a cousin, a niece, a nephew, a neighbor, then that applies to you also. Through those people, young people that you influence, you need to leave the best legacy possible. Now, I will say possible because you can't control all of it, can you? A lot that you can't control in your legacy. Number one, you can't erase the past. There's some messes sometimes in the past that you just can't undo that will influence the decisions that child might make in the future, or that you might need to overcome in your own life, in your own future. And also, you can't make decisions for your adult children. We have 3 children. They're all adults. They're all making their own decisions in life. And sometimes I think, I would like to have made that choice for her, but I don't get that opportunity. They have to make their own choices. But as far as is within your capacity, my call today is for you to leave the best possible spiritual legacy for the children that you influence, whether they're yours or someone else's under your influence. With all of that, I want to read some of the story about Tamar, the one daughter of David whose name we know. Now, we're going to read parts of this story. I'm going to tell a little bit of it, but I want to tell you what to look for in the story as we go. So just pay attention to these things. Number one, good, godly people can have messy family relationships. Just because the family relationship is messy doesn't mean you're not a person after God's own heart. David was. None of what we're going to read today dismisses the impact that he had on other people, even on us. 2, blended families sometimes fight against higher risks to come. Number 3, non-relational, I guess that's my word, I would say out-of-touch parenting increases the risk for healthy children. If a parent is hands-off, out of touch, out of the child's life, then it increases the risk, and we'll see a direct example of that in a moment. And next, you can't control your adult children. I referred to that already, but David's children made their own choices. Whether he helped or didn't help, at some point they had to make their own choices, and he couldn't control that. 2 Samuel 13. I don't have the scriptures up here, but I'll read you only a couple of verses, and we'll take it a little bit at a time so that we don't get lost. 2 Samuel 13 starts this way. Now David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amnon, her half-brother, fell desperately in love with her. Amnon became so obsessed with Tamar that he became ill. She was a virgin, and Amnon thought he could never have her. Now notice what's happening. Amnon is David's oldest son, the firstborn son. Now, there's a lot of things about that. In ancient times, oldest sons had a lot of extra privileges. Also, since he was a prince, the oldest son of the king, people would have expected him to become what? He would be the next king. And so he had privileges that are higher than most people could ever imagine. Now, it can happen anywhere, but in a blended family like this, children don't always grasp clearly and easily what's permissible and not permissible. Amnon finds himself attracted to his half-sister. So intense was the attraction that he fell what today we would say is madly in love, making himself completely sick. His daily life was disrupted. His mental health was at risk. Today's psychology experts would say that Amnon was in a state of limerence. I don't know if you've ever heard the word limerence or not, but it describes clearly the unreasonable obsession with something that is unrealistic that he had and wrapped himself around. And it happens to families today, sometimes in undescribable and ways that we can't even perceive are happening. It's an explanation that infatuation or attraction is not really true love, that there is a distinction between the two things. But when you're the person with these feelings, it's really hard to tell the difference. The younger you are, the harder it is to tell the difference. So if you're ever feeling this, here's what you need. You need other people to help you realize what's happening. You've got to have other people to give you a realistic perspective. So here's a reminder. Number one, again, family relationships are messy. Blended families can be extra messy. We recognize that here and around us. But here's the lesson. Seek godly advice anytime you have crazy ideas, crazy feelings, or crazy fantasies. Seek godly advice. That's everyone's responsibility. You must get that kind of advice from trusted people who can counsel you to follow God. Don't skip that part. If you're ever in a situation of uncertainty like that, seek godly advice from wise and trusted people. Amnon did not do this. He did not pick well at all. He went to his cousin, a crafty guy. The scriptures describe him in that way. And his cousin had this crazy scheme of pretending to be sick and laying in bed and begging for someone to send Tamar to him so that she could feed you. And he thought, well, I'll just try that. So Amnon didn't seek good advice. He did pretend to be sick. He tricked Tamar into his room. And here's the reading from verse 11. Then he said to Tamar, "Bring the food into my bedroom and feed it to me here." So Tamar took his favorite dish to him. But as she was feeding him, he grabbed her and demanded, "Come to bed with me, my sister." Now, this was a terrible idea. Every bit of it was terrible, and the way he got to it was terrible. But then, here's something fascinating that applies to us as well. He got some really good advice. Sometimes when you're on the brink of making a stupid decision, somebody will scream out, "Don't do it!" And that's what Tamar did. Here's what she says in the very next verse. "No, my brother, don't be foolish. Don't do this to me. Such wicked things are not done in Israel. Where could I go in my shame? And you would be called one of the greatest fools in all of Israel." He was the prince. He had every right to be honored and respected. And she appropriately said, "This will turn you into the greatest fool in the whole nation." And here's what she said that frustrates me a little. But she said, "Please, just speak to the king about this and he will let you marry me." Now, she begged him to not act like a fool, upset, but she didn't refuse his desire, which is totally against our culture. Realize they were in a different time frame, a different culture, different expectations, and royal family. There's a lot of crazy differences there. The disordered part, I might say. I would have expected her to get mad, fighting mad. I'm almost mad at her reading the story because she didn't, because I think that's what she should have done. But I know that she's probably right. If they had approached the king, Amnon could have gotten permission. They could have gotten married. He would have been respected and honored. And don't forget this detail, she would have been the next queen. That's an interesting dynamic as well. So she gives him good advice. If you're intent on pursuing this, here's a way to do it. So when you get good advice, the lesson is listen to it. Because he could have saved everything at that point, but no, he didn't. Here's what the next verse says. Amnon would not listen to her, and since he was stronger than she, he raped her. Then suddenly Amnon's love turned to hate, and he hated her even more than he loved her, and snarled at her to get out of here. Here's the proof. This is the part that made me mad, obviously, but here is the proof. Amnon's attraction was just infatuation and had nothing to do with true love. True love focuses on the other person, not on yourself. Always on the other person. It does not change instantly to hatred like that. So back to his state of limerence or unrealistic obsession. When things didn't seem in the story that they could get any worse, I would just think that's as bad as it can get. But they do. Tamar was heartbroken. She was consumed with grief. It showed not only in her face, it showed in the way she dressed. And here's what the next, well, not the next verse, but a few verses down says, verse 20. Her brother Absalom saw her and asked, "Is it true that Amnon has been with you?" "Well, my sister, keep quiet for now since he's your brother. Don't you worry about it." So Tamar lived as a desolate woman in her brother, that's her full brother Absalom's house, apparently for a long time. The next verse says, when King David heard what happened, he was very angry. And though Absalom never spoke to Amnon about this, he hated Amnon deeply because of what he had done to his sister. Apparently, King David was angry too, but it's not clear exactly how he responded, at least immediately. We don't know for sure. As I said at the beginning, we don't have a lot of details, but it could have been his parenting style all along. After all, he was a warrior kind of guy. Angry, quiet, mad, not follow up on things. I don't know, but didn't build close relationships with his children, apparently. In this case, his third son, Amnon was the first, Absalom was the third one. He created a deep hatred in his heart against his half-brother Amnon. Do you know what happens when you cultivate hatred? Satan makes sure that it grows. It will ultimately consume you, and it will ultimately demand some kind of retaliation, whether soon or later. Now, this is not some ancient story. It could be our story. We see this story playing out over and over again. Unresolved or unchecked hatred will destroy everything in its path, and that's exactly what happened here. First, nothing happened. Actually, nothing happened for 2 full years, which is a long time. And then Absalom invited all of his siblings and his half-siblings to celebrate the sheep shearing season with him. He made certain that Amnon, who he hated more every single day, was there. And then verse 28 says this, Absalom told his men, "Wait till Amnon gets drunk, then at my signal, kill him. Don't be afraid. I'm the one who's given the command. Take courage and do it." So at Absalom's signal, they murdered Amnon. And then the other sons of the king jumped on their mules and fled. So one brother is now killing another brother, a repeat of what we read in the very first pages of the Bible. David mourned the death of his firstborn son. And Absalom was banished. David did banish Absalom from his sight and from the city, and he left. Actually, the next verse says, or the last verse of the chapter says, Absalom fled to his grandfather, Talmai, son of Amminadab, the king of Geshur. He stayed there in Geshur for 3 years, and King David, then reconciled to Amnon's death, longed to be reunited with his son Absalom. He still felt a love for his children. But here's a reminder, some things can't be fixed. Sometimes the past just can't be fixed at all. David couldn't bring his daughter back. In the absence of any relationship whatsoever with Absalom in this period had a devastating consequence. In the next story that gets worse and worse, David and Absalom never reconciled, never had a relationship again. They never talked through or worked through what had happened at all. And the distance and silence was painful, not just for them, but for everyone in their sphere of influence. Hatred grew. Eventually, a civil war in the nation was started because of this event. So the event was devastating on a national level. Personal emotions threatened the political and economic stability of the entire nation because of who the family was. And ultimately, Absalom was murdered by the national military commanders. 2 sons of David now have been murdered. It's a sad story. It's a real sad story. I would have taken it out of the Bible, but it's here. So I want to know, why have we studied this passage? You know, one reason is that all Scripture has value, as I said. There's a lot of lessons in this very section. And I or you don't need to just skip over a passage because we don't like it. I have a confession. I was a little puzzled when Evan asked me to preach today, and I looked at what the passage was, and I thought, there's a mistake. There's got to be a mistake. I've never heard a sermon on that chapter of the Bible. I went back and looked at the email. No, it was right. I later asked him. It was right. And I thought, well, I could just make up excuses and not go that day. I'll just see what he does with it. I thought, well, I could just preach about God is love. He loves all the children, and no one would know because I get the microphone. I get to do what I want to, right? But I decided, no, Nancy and I have made a commitment to love all Scripture and learn from all Scripture, and I'm a big boy and a team player, and we're going to look at this passage, and I believe it has a lot of lessons for us. The reminders from the beginning are the same ones. Good, godly people can have messy family relationships. Blended families have higher risk, so be cautious, be careful, be alert if you find yourself in one. And absentee parenting is devastating for children and creates and complicates some of the messes even more. And ultimately, you can't control your adult children. You influence them, you encourage them, you pray for them, but you can't control what they do. If any of that resonates with you, remember, you are not alone. And don't let those facts turn your attention away from God or make you feel like you are worthless in God's service. That is not true and is only a message from Satan himself. All of us wish that David had a better legacy through his children. We all do. It would be wonderful for everyone. But remember, you do have a legacy, and you need to do the best you can to make it as good as possible. Other people in the next generation are watching and learning from you. Pay attention, follow God, and be a good example for them. Now, I don't want you to ignore any opportunities to improve your legacy. But what is it you can do? If you're the parent or guardian or influential person in a young person's life, here's number one: seek the child. All of us suspect that David was so busy running the country and fighting the wars and away from home that he wasn't very present in the lives of his children. It doesn't mean you have to be there all the time. You can have a life, but don't ignore the people, young people that you're responsible for. Nancy and I have had this challenge ourselves. When our children would make poor choices, we've decided the main thing is to keep the relationship. She's better at this than me. So we're going to keep the relationship open so we can have an influence on what the next steps are. And that's important. Seek the child, number one. And number two, this is really simple, seek God. Now you're seeking God for yourself, but you're also seeking God for the child to follow God. Never forget that your objective is not to control the child, make the child into something that you want to do, make the child make you look good. The goal is always to help the child follow God better. And that will be the greatest legacy you can leave spiritually and emotionally and financially and socially for all the generations to come. Even if you change the life of one child in a positive way to follow God, you have changed the entire world. On the flip side, if you're the child, it's the same thing. First, seek the parent or the influential person. Don't ignore them. Notice Amnon didn't go to his dad and say, I'm struggling with these feelings. He didn't seek advice even from an older, wiser counsel. And the next thing is to seek God. Ignoring either of those can be devastating for young people. And so we need to, it's not complicated, but we see a gap in this story. And I'm calling us today to make a commitment that we will seek the other person, influence them for good by seeking God for their life and for our own life. As you model that relationship and spend time with younger people, the impact is absolutely amazing. Pray for God to show you the next steps. And if you're struggling in any way with this, find somebody who seems to be doing a little better and ask them for advice. Watch them, imitate them, and ask them for advice. Today, all of this is summarized in following God.